One of the duties of the first officer of the Klingon vessel is to assassinate the captain. Wesley Crusher thinks all Benzites look the same, and Riker says, look at me. Look at me. I am the captain now. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello, hello.
My name is Ryan T. Husk. Today we're doing a review of Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 2, Episode 8, A Matter of Honor. Story by Wanda M. Haight and Gregory Amos and Burton Armis. Teleplay by Burton Armis. Directed by Rob Bowman. This was February 4th, 1989. Where were you? We have a very, very special guest. We are honored to be joined once again by Mr. You know who it is. It's Michael Westmore.
The legend.
Yay! The man who brings his own applause. Yeah. I love it. So happy to see you once again. We're truly honored to have you. Everybody, this is somebody's favorite episode ever. And it is sponsored by that man. It is Justin Weir. Justin Weir, thank you very much for sponsoring this episode. This one is for you. How you guys doing today?
Great.
I'm great.
Doing great. This episode was great too, actually. And I remember, I think Justin was saying, "I can't wait till you get to this episode."
Yep.
So I'm happy that we're finally here because it was a great episode. There was a lot going on, and one of the better episodes I think of this series because it was entertaining and from kind of beginning to end for me. And Michael, you had a lot to do with that. I look like you had a lot on your hands because every time I see a multitude of Klingons, I think, oh, that's a lot of makeup going on.
And Ferengi.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you're doing like all of this makeup and you have so many different people, how much of it is about delegating and kind of balancing time, with 4 or 5 Klingons in an episode?
We had one of them where there were 25. But I had a great Jill Rockow, who was a great friend and a makeup artist. And I could literally go to Jill and say, Jill, go and get all the Klingon makeup, which ranged from a color called Malibu tan to very dark brown. And I'd say, get the glue, get this, get that, you know what you need to get. And son of a gun, Jill would get on that, or somebody else, might fool around for a while. And Jill would have it literally all set up. So I had great people working for me over the 18 years. It was a pleasure to work with them. And and not only that, but they could turn out the work to where I've even had recent comments from one of the shows that's airing now, and the new one, and a number of people have written in saying that this is as close as it really came to the real Next Generation, and it was responsible for the great work of making the show look, from then, and them reprising it now with the makeup following, which I was always afraid of, and it did happen. This is as close as they came to redoing Next Gen.
Was that Star Trek Picard, probably, right?
No.
Strange New Worlds. Discovery. Yes. Okay, Strange New Worlds.
Because my thing, when I first got there, and I had my meetings with Gene Roddenberry and Berman and everybody, that I became close with Gene. Nice, sweet man. I also was Majel's personal makeup artist through all the years, and saw Roddenberry grow up from a little kid. And I would have to listen to Majel all the time going, Rod, guess what he's done now? And Rod has turned out to be such a wonderful gentleman over the years.
Yeah.
And it's, but Gene told me what he wanted, and I followed that. if I came up with an idea, I would go to Gene and say, this is what I want to do. Originally they wanted Michael Dorn to shave his head and just glue the spine across the top of his head. And I said, you don't want to do that to Mike. We can't do that. I said, I'll make up a forehead. And then it didn't quite look right with just a forehead. So then we did the teeth and the nose. And that became our signature for those 18 years. And that was what interesting, what the compliment was from these people on this new show, is that they kept the same spirit of Gene Roddenberry alive. It wasn't like going off and trying to make a new wheel or something, which I was happy to see.
You brought up a point that I wanted to just kind of get a little elaboration on. You mentioned the forehead and the shaving of the head. And my question is, how much collaboration is done between the hair department when you're doing the kinds of wigs that you have, like for these Klingons, and then the makeup? And, do you go to one first, do the other first? Do you fit around the hair, or does the hair fit around the makeup? Like, what is the process with that?
Well, exactly what you said. They come in and they get made up first. Usually they come in for not a test, but when they come in for a wardrobe fitting and things. At that time, we would select the color of the wig and the style of the wig. So when the time came for that actor to work, it was all set up. We knew what color makeup was going to be. And it always was a tan color to a very dark color, depending on the person's own skin tone. So we wouldn't have to do a lot of hatching or mixing of colors and things. So, but we had it down to probably half a dozen different shades of Klingon makeup. And we made all that makeup up ourselves. In the very beginning, it was a max factor rubber grease. But then we found that we could mix our own with acrylic colors from the art store and a water-based glue and mix this all up. And so we finally had formulas made up, how many drops of this and drops of that made up a color. So like the day that we were doing 25 Klingons, it worked like clockwork because we knew exactly everything we were going to do, we did.
Yeah, but you must have had to hire like a bunch of extra hands for that week or something like that.
We figured 2 Klingons per person. So that means they did one early in the morning. 12 makeup artists come in. We do one early in the morning, and then as soon as they finish that one, they would start on their second one.
Well, now, specifically about this episode, Michael, you did get an Emmy nomination for this, which is incredible in its own right. It may have been for the several amazing-looking Klingons, but I submit it probably had a lot to do with, of course, Ensign Mendon, who was the second Benzite, played again by the same actor, John Putch, good friend of the show. We love that guy, amazing man. As we mentioned before we hit record, there don't seem to be any bad angles to shoot this Benzite. It's 360 degrees of very good makeup, which is probably why you got the Emmy nomination. Can you speak a little bit on that? And were there any improvements made from the first Benzite to the second, or did you just
how many years later?
It was just the next season. It was just the next season.
No, I don't think anything changed at all. In starting off with it, because I had no rules to go by. I never had any rules to go by my 18 years. The writers never wrote anything in a script that said this is what they're supposed to look like. Let me know what planet it's coming from, and thank you very much, goodbye. And they left it up to me to figure out. And with the Benzite, this was actually the first, I want to say, major alien that we came up with, and it's a full head, and the pieces on it went. It had a different upper lip, and it had different eyelids and opposable thumbs. And the whole thing was just literally coming out of my mind, and doing it. When I'm saying the full head, you can see the picture on the full head, and the eyes look a little puffy. When in the old days, before they had many Chinese or Asian actors, we made Chinese eyelids, and so that's what I made for Mordock. And the same pieces, all the same pieces, were used on any Benzite that would ever appear in the show. But it was all made personally on John, and the lids could literally flap up right here. They're puffy, and you in sculpting it, you reversed it, and you cut out little Venetian blind type of things. So when he opened his eyes, the eyelids would literally fold into themselves. And then there was a separate upper lip that had little, I kind of had a fishy look going in it. This is like little catfish feelers.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. Was that designed to like help him with the breathing, or was there any breathing done with that?
That's just part of the character that came out of it.
Yeah.
And then we don't have a profile on it, but right behind the ear here, there's other little things that come out from the backs of the earlobes. And at this time, it was very hot, and I didn't have a lab then. So I sculpted this at home in the kitchen when we were living in Studio City. And if you can see the little protuberances in the back, Mackenzie that time, I don't remember how old she was, but she was young. And I had some clay sitting on the table there, and she kind of picked it up and rolled it and stuck it on the back.
Really?
Back yeah. And so that's what
she had a little job.
Yeah. And I looked at it and I said, do I take that off? Because right away it's like, oh, don't touch it. Wait a minute. That looks kind of neat. Because we had this going with the catfish feelers, and they're you can see where they are right up in here.
Right behind
are they on the doll?
Yeah, no, I don't know. Just showing off that I still got this guy. Everybody just listening in, I just pulled up my Mordock action figure. Our friend Darth Shui will remind you, it's not a doll, it's an action figure, but it's kind of a doll, though. Anyway, okay. Please continue.
So with Mackenzie, take a look at it, and I thought, hey, that's not bad. It's kind of an accent as opposed to just being a round head in the back there. And so we left it. And that became all part of Mackenzie's contribution to the Mordock look.
Mm-hmm. And as you can see, those tendrils or whatever they might be are a little bit longer on this female Benzite from Deep Space Nine.
Uh-huh.
Right here. Anyway.
There's also a little throat piece here that I don't think we had on Putch. That would have been an addition to saying, what can we do to make it a little better?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then the colors, and we were using, again, rubber grease and things, because PAX, which is that adhesive colorants that we eventually used the rest of the time once we started using that. The basic color was blue, and I used orange and yellow as highlights. And then there's also some little freckles in there. This is all the things that, instead of just painting them all blue, you do something to break it up and give it character. And so that's what I did for it. Now, with this particular thing, when we first started, I designed it, I sculpted it, I made the molds on it, I painted it, and I glued them in. So it was like, did it from the beginning to end. I didn't have enough help then. And the other person I had as help had to stay on the set and watch the set while I did this work. It's very interesting. that there's a book called Artifacts and Aliens, Star Trek
So
Artifacts.
that's applied with airbrush, Michael,
No,
or is that with a
no,
paintbrush?
didn't have airbrushes yet. Airbrush didn't come in until the beginning of the Borg. So I did all this with sponges and brushes to soften it out as it went. Um, it, it was the way it was done at that time until the next step came in, which was um, I I took a class. There were like four of us that took an airbrush class, and this guy came over to Paramount in our lab, and he showed us how to all the tricks of using the airbrush. You know, pulling the lever on it and being able to highlight and shadow. This would have been great. This would have been a great makeup to have had an airbrush on. It would have gone faster. And the reason that were the airbrushes for the Borgs is because when we first did them, they needed shading. They had to go around the eyes. We did the temples, we did the cheeks, we did these things. And I could give, and this actually happened, where we were doing about 10 of them or so, and every one of them looked different. And the reason being, somebody that had a very soft touch, they looked all white with just a little bit of gray in them. Somebody that had a heavy touch would turn their whiteboard makeup into a muddy mess on the face. And when that happened, we had to touch them up and do things to them. So I decided to with the airbrush, and I was able to. Everybody would put their Borg together and put the light base on, which was a base. It was called Shibui, which it wasn't pure white. It was an off white. But I could take the airbrush then when somebody finished them, send them to me, and I could spray the eyes, spray in less than a minute. So I was able to turn all 12 of those people out in less than 12 minutes. So we used an airbrush from that time on.
Wow.
Yeah. But the more you know, as I was saying, he had rubber eyelids that folded in when he opened up, had the upper lip here, just so he didn't look like a human lip talking. And then he had opposing thumbs. There was a point in the show, in the first one, where he was working on a computer base or something. And what I did is I took, taking one hand, and that's the hand, then sculpting on the little finger an opposable thumb, copying John's this thumb, and it would slip on. And that's what we did on both hands.
So it was like thumbs on either end of the hand and three fingers sides, in the middle.
I think was when he was going with it, he could work with it, and it slipped on just like a glove. You know, wow. I had kind of forgotten about that until I looked in my book and I read what I had said many years ago.
And in today's episode, he actually used it. I saw him not trying to avoid using it because it's a prosthetic. He actually went and hit a button with it, I noticed. So,
well, he was really glued in well. But now this was spirit gum, and which was a pain in the butt to put a woman together using spirit gum. We eventually changed to a silicone adhesive, which I have to tell you, when Star Trek finished, I gave my son Michael about 3 gallons of this stuff was left over, and it was very expensive. And he took it and reformulated it, and now he sells it all over the world. But it stuck even with it being spirit gum. The only big problem is it was a real pain to take it off an actor with a spirit gum, because you had to take like acetone and alcohol and very carefully take it off. And at that time, when it came off, it was a throwaway piece. When we finally went to silicone adhesive, we were able to use pieces over and over again, especially like for the Ferengi and the Klingon.
Yeah, that brought up my next question, which was about removal. Because I used to watch some of the, just the whole process of removing and then cleaning the face after the actor was completely removed, and they go through the whole.
Right.
I remember seeing stuff like Cetaphil and other kinds of cleansers that were being used, but What were some of the tools that you would use? Was that done with brushwork? Was that done with like wooden?
You mean to remove it?
Yeah, the removing of the. Yeah,
Yeah, you'd find a little hole somewhere, and you'd get your brush in there, and you'd have to go here, and you get it down, and then you slowly, very slowly, it would peel away, and you just keep brushing, and
A
then getting
long
the nose
process.
off, and then getting out, working behind the cheeks. So cleanup was also uh, extensive. It could be all the way from a small Bajoran nose to some full face thing uh, like John Putch.
Very
yeah,
quickly,
and
just to add to that, sorry, but I just want to. When I've had it done to my face quite a few times, and in my experience, and correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, the most sensitive area was right on the eyelids and under the eye, where people would have to be really careful about pulling because the skin is so thin. Were there particular problem areas, including that or besides that, that you would always have to be super careful around when removing the makeup?
No, mainly the eyes. Everything else is really, you can take it apart pretty quick.
Okay.
yeah, that answers my question as well. But also, back to the Klingon. So this wasn't the biggest kind of Klingon. You mentioned 25, but I did notice the variety of colors in the Klingons' makeup, because there were different, obviously, shades of people.
Yeah.
Particularly the woman who was like a darker looking Klingon woman that was being looked at by Riker at some point in this episode. And so you did address one of the things that I thought while watching this episode was that the actors who play Klingons have a variety of skin tone color,
Right.
And so you would have to variate when you're dealing with that, right?
But you normally, like with Caucasians, it was Malibu tan because it gave them a tan, but you wouldn't want to put a really dark base on them because of their hands and around the neck and everything. But if somebody had like an ebony skin tone, very dark, we had a base to match that just to solve the problem of not having to make them all up. So it wasn't anybody that could come in that we couldn't match something up to go with their skin tone.
Did you, because you said you had a base you said you had maybe 12 different base colors. Obviously, skin tones are never going to match exactly. Was there a basic rule of thumb to where you would either go slightly darker and blend that in with the makeup, or slightly lighter and then blend that in with the makeup? Or was there just kind of whatever's closest?
It was always darker. Okay. Yeah. Even Malibu tan was like somebody that's
got
Malibu, actually has a tan. Mm-hmm. Where if somebody had very pale skin, we couldn't put a darker base on. That would be terrible to do. There's too many little areas to cover up, but as a skin tone got darker, we could. We tried to match as close to save us time, and because the next day they're going to work and probably clean them up the night before, so it's. It worked out. It was a system we had to. In fact, all of Star Trek was a system that we had to work with to make it work, whether it be color tones or an appliance that's too big or too small. We had ways of taking and pulling a larger appliance in to make it a little smaller, or to let it out. We would maybe cut up the back of the head and then have a very thin patch of rubber and could glue that over the top of it and blend it in to expand the head. So there was always tricks to make it work.
Mm-hmm.
I have I know I have so many questions, but I can sit here and ask you 1,000 questions. But my last question is about contact lenses that change the eyes to different looks, and I wondered what was the system or process for deciding when for deciding when to use them and not, because I see a
Right.
lot of the aliens don't have them, but then sometimes you do use them. And what was the impetus to bring in those lenses when you thought they were necessary?
Well, usually we'd bring lenses in when a character was changing that maybe had some type of um, lizard quality or something. Another lens I had double pupils in it, or if you wanted to have red or whatever. What I would do is I would paint up what what I thought I would like to have in the character, something that would lend to the character and actually give you a little bit of feel of whatever I was thinking of that it had, whether it was a bird or a microbe or whatever. Um, and then we would send them over to an optical company that would take the actor and make measurements on their eyes. And there was a special person that painted those eyes, and they were fantastic. And they happened to work for the optical lab that we sent them to, and they would literally paint them up, and those contact lenses fit those people absolutely perfect, as if they were going in to have normal contacts made. And then the day they worked, we would always have a lab technician come to Brent, and he put these in every day. Usually he would put them in before I would do his hands, his yellow contact lenses. And once in a while, he would, even though they're supposedly were all the same, he would have trouble where his real eyes would be a little red or pink at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
But and that's why with Brent we did with yellow lenses with him, because it really went good with the gold fleck that was in his makeup. And so it worked. Oh, and I was telling you, a technician would come in and put lenses in. So aside from Brent and Marina with their betazoid lenses,
Yeah.
that a technician was putting them in and taking them out. And these lenses we were using were very soft, very pliable, and they would breathe. Prior to Star Trek, when I was doing like Masters of the Universe, they were made out of like glass, and you could only leave them in for 20 seconds or 20 minutes, because the lens would cover the eye, and there was no way for oxygen to get to it. And a person's eyes would start turning, the whites of the eyes would start turning blue if you didn't take them out the longest 30 minutes. And the longer you left them past the 20 minutes, the longer you had to leave them out for them to repair themselves before you could put them back in again.
Wow.
But that's the way it was done almost up until the time Star Trek started.
Well, Michael, this has been so much fun, as always. I feel like Cirroc and I each have 14 more questions to ask you, but we'll have to save those for the next time. We appreciate you so much. We appreciate you taking the time to join us, and all of the work that you've put in to Star Trek, as well as the work you put in beforehand, like Masters of the Universe, with, I believe, a Star Trek alum, Robert Duncan McNeil.
Yeah,
in that movie.
That's where I met
correctly.
Robbie. Yeah,
Oh, that's so cool. And all of your work since then. But Michael, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Michael.
yeah. I'm glad I was pull it off today.
Barely. All right, everybody. Stick around. Very special thanks to Michael Westmore and his many, many, many Emmy nominations and wins. This is one of the nominations today. We will be right back with more good stuff on The Seventh Rule.